Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. I'm your host, Lasheena Williams, and so excited to be back here with you all as we kick off this month's conversation on year-end planning. And yes, for some of you, you may say, hey, we're starting it early, but we know that some organizations are getting ready to wrap up their fiscal years coming up, and whether it's in June you're wrapping up, or October, or September, October range or calendar year. We wanted to start this conversation early, so we like to do this topic a couple times throughout the year. And I am so excited to have Shameka Allen Lane back on as we talk about this and some things that you should consider when you're getting ready to wind down and kick off a new year. So let's welcome Shameka back to the show. Hello, hello, Shameka. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
Yes, it is always good to see you, and thank you for coming back.
Yes,
So,
thank you so much.
before we get started, for those who may not have had a chance to get to know you, do you mind just talking a little bit? And you know my favorite story, but do you mind just talking a little bit about your nonprofit journey and the work that you do to support nonprofit organizations?
Sure, absolutely. So, excuse me. My name is Shameka Allen Lane, and I am the principal event scientist at Catalyst Event Coaching. And so, my in the nonprofit space actually started before I got into the events industry. And basically, I was a chemistry student. So, notice Catalyst. I was a chemistry
Hmm.
student going for engineering as well. So, I was a dual degree student and joined a student operated nonprofit. So, more of an association, but learn how to deal with all of those net zero budgets and all the wonderful things that comes with operating a nonprofit, because as a student leader we were able to do that, and that really created my foundation of nonprofit organizations. So at this point I'm actually a co-founder of a nonprofit organization that supports my hometown in the areas of wellness and education. I sit on boards of various nonprofit organizations, and it is a dear spot of mine. So there's a lot of clients that I have that are in the nonprofit space. And so my company, Catalyst Event Coaching, if you hear the name, basically it's what some people think as soon as they hear it. We support teams around basically allowing you to execute the event. So empowering you with the tools that are necessary, processes, systems, all of those wonderful things so that your team can execute that. And of course, that is very helpful for nonprofits. But we also execute events, and that's in the nonprofit as well as virtual spaces. And my unique bring, if you will, to Lasheena's point, is coming from that science based technical background. I'm very analytical and logistics driven with things. So a lot of processes, systems,
Hmm.
analytics. Some people are maybe more used to those event space people that are more on the aesthetic side of things, but I'm on a different plane, if you will.
Hmm. I love that. And I love the combination of the science of the events. So you taking, your background in engineering and then turning, helping that develop the framework when it comes to events. So
Absolutely.
love that, love that. Okay, so this month we're talking about, and you're kicking it off for the month on this conversation. And when it comes to year-end planning for organizations, what are some things you recommend that they start thinking about?
Well, first off, this is good timing. So I'm glad you are doing it now. This is good timing. To your point, this is the end of some
Hmm.
organizations' fiscal years, um,
Hmm.
midpoint for others, but definitely a good checkpoint regardless of where you are in your
Hmm.
actual year. And so I would say, especially if you're working off a calendar year, we're getting towards that midway point.
Hmm.
We're at that chance of okay, it's time to change the game if the plan wasn't working.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who has been just living around this year, there has been a lot of changes. Maybe not all the things that you thought when you made your plans at the end of the year last year. So, there are definitely some things to consider. We are under a new administration, which automatically makes new changes come about. So, looking at what's going on, and in this case, we do have a lot of executive orders that are affecting a lot of organizations. So, we want to take a look at any plans that we've made for this year and see how these changes are affecting them. For some people, it may be positive changes, but in a lot of cases, it's definitely shaking it up a little bit to you
Mm-hmm.
for you to just kind of reassess like, wait a minute, this was the goal at one point because we knew the game rules, if you will, at that point, but the rules of the game have changed since
Mm-hmm.
the beginning of the year. So reassessing where your plans are for the year versus what changes have happened and what changes we anticipate will happen, because some of them haven't happened yet. Some of them are in talks or in motion, but they haven't
Mm-hmm.
quite happened yet. So getting in front of what those changes are, I will tell you, being in the event space, I have witnessed a lot of nonprofit based organizations who had to make immediate changes.
Mm-hmm.
And some were in motion to events, and we were 2 weeks out, and we had to completely change the way we do things. And so, to that point, I will bring up something that I don't know that I even thought I would hear anytime soon. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but with these type of changes that could potentially affect organizations, people refer back to what they know, right? Any change that they've experienced that's closest to what they
Mm-hmm.
think this is like, right? So I've heard nonprofits actually go back to the concept of 9/11, where
Mm-hmm.
there were some
Mm-hmm.
perceptions that they had to manage around that time. And then I've heard things around COVID, some changes that
Mm-hmm.
we made then because it was just changes and we had to adjust to the times. So those are two, I would say, scenarios that I'm hearing where organizations are having a hard marker of where they can refer back to, this is what we did during that time. Let's revisit what those
Mm-hmm.
things look like. And so if I take the example of the 9/11 situation, there was a lot of perceptions, whether your organization had money or not. If you appeared that you were spending money just because, it was a bad look. You may have had your budgets already approved. You may have been working on this
Mm-hmm.
program for years and had this budget approved, but nevertheless, if you
Mm-hmm.
show up in that way, it's not a good look for society. And so
Mm-hmm.
the perception becomes an issue and could affect your donations, right? So these are things that we want to consider as we move forward with the year.
I love that. You touched on so much different pieces. Um, and I love that you kind of talked about the just being able to go with the shift, and you reference those different times, and there's many other times as well that
Absolutely.
organizations, right when we think, okay, we're getting back in the groove of things, then things just start to shift, and we just being able to shift with it. I also like that you mentioned taking a look at what your plans are coming up, and then how does the current change in climate impact those plans moving forward. So I like that you mentioned that. So as you get ready to kind of wrap up the year and trying to look forward for the next year, or even your midpoint of the year, do these events, do these programs, do these activities, does this new hire, does can we still do this, or should
Listen,
we still do this?
listen, because I cannot tell you the amount of organization leaders I have sat down with in the past
Hmm.
month who have already decided that programs are being canceled. And it's not because they just want the programs to go away. Because something else that we also have to consider, from a economic standpoint, We haven't really had the recession cycle that is usually we skipped a cycle. I will put
Mhm.
it that way. We skipped a cycle. So there's some other things. We have layers of
Mhm.
potential changes that are happening, right? And so organizations are getting in front of it because they know where their financial standing is in
Mhm.
this moment. And if you don't, I hope you immediately go find out your financial standing.
Mhm.
But they know what their financial standings are in this moment in time. And then they're also thinking about what's that process look like to make these
Mhm.
things happen, right? And in doing so, some of which are grants, and a lot of grants have changed, requirements. A lot of them have also been canceled. Um, there are a lot of corporations that have slammed back their spending because they're making adjustments as well with the times. And so, with that, organizations are saying if they know that something is heavily funded by, say, a corporation, and that corporation has made cutbacks, they're getting in front of it and they're like, we're not going in debt next year. We're not
Mhm.
going to do this. We're going to do what we have this year and finish that out for the year. But next year, we're not going to do that big event that goes with that program at the end. We're going to imagine it different so that
Mhm.
we can still execute the program that's essential to our mission, but not do all the fanfare because it's going to cost us. And
Mhm.
not only do we not know if we're going to get the sponsorship and donor dollars for that, but also considering if attendees will be able to come in the same way, because it depends on what it takes for those
Mhm.
attendees to come out, how, what's giving them
Mhm.
that ability to come out. So they may not have the attendance, because that's something else we're seeing, that attendance is going down across the board for a
Mm.
lot of organizations. So we want to take all of those things in consideration, along with your resources, of course, and do things that make sense for the organization.
Wow. So in the event space, what are some tips you have for organization when considering if that event that we've been doing, should we keep it going at the same level? Like, what should we make some adjustments? Like, what are some considerations when
Sure.
looking at your events for the upcoming year?
Sure. Good question. Love that question. I would say number one, I would assess where it aligns to our mission.
Mhm.
Hopefully, it is on mission, on target, but I would definitely assess that, because sometimes people find that they did something for another reason and it just kind of went to the left,
Mhm.
like that particular year we did this for this reason. Everybody lost sight of that was the reason for that year, and it
Mhm.
just became a thing. And we've been doing it every year since, and it's been fun in our routine. So I would definitely assess if that is something that is aligned. With that, let me also say sometimes you have to skip a program a year. Like when we
Mhm.
come on these tough times, you need to consider what is your signature programs, is what I would call them, that you do like nobody else.
Mhm.
And it is pertinent to how you operate, it is pertinent to your mission. So you want to consider those types of programs, number one. So if it's not aligned with that, you might have to say, we're going to skip next year. We got a
Mhm.
plan, but we're going to skip next year. And then there are times where you might have to reimagine what that looks like.
Mhm.
And so look at how you've been doing it, what purpose that has served the way you've been doing it, and then start to consider, is there another way to do it
Mhm.
that may still get the impact that you're looking for and reduce cost or reduce resources? Bonus if
Mhm.
you could do both.
Right? Yep.
Yes. So that's definitely something I would say, with that, because so much has changed. I'm gonna say, or anticipation of so much is changing in the grant space.
Mhm.
I know you did data last month.
Yeah.
Data
Yep.
is king. So you want to be intentional as you
Yeah.
approach these events with data. You know,
Mm-hmm.
what's necessary? What do you need? What's a good way to follow up and be intentional, not just ask it because that's what you've seen somewhere else. Make sense with the information and be intentional about getting it and when to get it because you want to make it convenient. If you can't
Mm-hmm.
conveniently get this information, then you may or may not get the
Yeah.
information. So you want to make sure that you're getting the information you need and your team is executing on that. So you want to also do some automations. Um,
Oh yeah.
but I would say those are a couple of good things. Additionally, start considering partnerships, right?
Mm-hmm.
This day and age, I'm going to say right now, especially relationship is key. And that's across the board. In this moment, we're talking about it as it relates to potential partnerships, but you want to foster all of your relationships right now because if I don't know you or we don't have a different level tie with each other, when I'm cutting the fat, you might leave with the fat
Mm-hmm.
that I'm cutting, right? So
Yeah.
you want to definitely consider that. And there may be like organizations or at least organizations that have like programs or resources that complement each other
Mm-hmm.
that will align in the grand scheme of things that you could potentially partner up with so that you are maximizing the resources that are available.
I love it. And I have all my notes that we're gonna go back and talk about a few of the things as you were going. I was thinking about one, I'm gonna start with you were talking earlier and I was just the grassroots organizations came to my mind like instantly. And the reason is because a lot of the grassroots organizations I found when speaking with them, they're funding out of their pockets, no matter how much I tell y'all to stop. So in the sense of they're funding everything out of their pockets, and as we get ready to wrap up this year, knowing what's going on, I'm going to just give that reminder to stop doing that. And part of it is I know we're talking about from the organizational standpoint on, with the shifts happening, being, conservative and so forth, but also it can impact your personal. You don't want to be taking out of your pockets because then it's going to start impacting home, which can impact a whole nother line of things. And that's why I recommend not one nonprofits, especially public 501(c)(3)s, are made for that partnership and collaboration and public being able to be a part of your mission. So this is your reminder to stop doing that, especially during these times. And those programs that you have that you've been funding, those might be some of the ones you got to assess, like, hold on, we're going to pause that for this year, or we're going to see if we could get some additional, some funding in before that event happens, to pay for that event. Those might be the events you got to look at. And I've been telling you all this before, but now you definitely definitely want to zoom
Mhm.
in and become like really laser focused on the programs, the activities, the things that you do, and where you are spending your money for your organization. So that's what came to mind when you were talking earlier. That just that call to those organizations that's funding. And I know we have a lot in the group that's either just getting started or just continuing to maintain through personal funds, but just take that into consideration during this time. The other thing you touched on was partnerships and collaborations, which is absolutely huge. So partnerships, collaborations, even your donors, volunteers. I know we talk about in nonprofit, engaging those that you might have at some year you've been involved with, or it may have been last year, your Libunts, your Cybunts, and all the others, just engaging with those because it's more cost effective for your organization to engage and build upon a relationship that you have already versus the cost it takes to go ahead and build those new relationships. So during this time, really zooming in and honing in on those people and showing them the love for those that you've been working with at some point, over the last few years or even currently, and how can we now take our relationship to the next level? And that's a conversation even with our own, on the nonprofit side, our own donors and so forth. It's been this constant reoccurring, like, all right, we work it, we here, like, we've been working together this long. The
Mhm.
donors are like, hey, I'm not going nowhere else. I'm gonna be here. We already been here for 3 years now. How are we gonna take this to the next level? Like, what's next for us, kind of
Right.
thing. And those are the types of conversations that we're starting to
Right.
have. To now, like, let's just go ahead. We know what's going on. We have security in each other. Knowing that,
Yes.
you know.
And I mean,
Yeah.
just a quick little tidbit, a quick little tidbit.
Yes.
That's something that happened to
Uh-huh.
me this week. Because like the
Yes.
organizations in my business,
Mhm.
I'm reassessing, are we on track
Mhm.
with everything? And with that, I was putting up my game plan. I was getting my strategy together. Like, how are we pivoting? And one of my clients in a standing meeting we had, they've been looking for someone in a role
Mhm.
to hire as a W-2 employee to bring on board. And then I guess they weren't
Mhm.
successful in finding what they were looking for. And somebody from the higher up, who I have not
Mhm.
personally met, was like, we've been working with
Mhm.
Shameka for years. Do we think Shameka can do this? Somebody reach out to Shameka
Yeah.
because this might make sense. And they did. And there's like a
Mhm.
twofold to it. And they've already gave me the go ahead on one of those contracts, which is expanding the services that I already offer. And I've been hearing from other people
Mhm.
that's happening where if they're making the cutbacks, they're going with what they think is
Mhm.
the sure thing. They're going with their relationships they
Yep.
already have and trying to save money in that way. Like, wait a minute, we know it's going to get done. We already have this relationship, we have this rapport. Let's
Mhm.
work together on these bigger things. So there could be opportunity that comes with this for sure, but you got to foster
Mhm.
those relationships.
Yes. Yep. Y- Yeah. That's a really good tip. So, man, I'm just thinking about all the different, like, relationship to just to be able just to hone in, and this is your time to really get reconnected or connect with those you've been trying to build relationships with. And in that example you gave, yeah, the cost that is going to take to try to, just like onboarding a new hire, like the cost is going to take to bring someone in
And
and
that's what it
and
was.
train
You
them.
got to pay for their
Yep.
benefits
They might leave
package.
us, like all of that. Why don't I work with someone who I've been with, for years? It was working, I get, the contractor versus W-2, but it's working. And during these times, if it works,
Mhm.
we got to keep it going. You know what I mean? So yeah, that is
Right.
great. Any other tips that you would like to share for those tuning in when it comes to year-end planning to keep in mind?
Yes, let's do some realistic
Mm-hmm.
goals.
Yep.
And so that goes back to the point made earlier where
Mm-hmm.
you're reassessing where we are and what's going on, because what was considered realistic at the beginning of the year may or may not be considered
Mm-hmm.
realistic now. So go ahead and ensure that with the new information that these are realistic goals, and if you got to pivot or make some changes, make them to something that is realistic, because at the end of this, I want people to still have
Mm-hmm.
that good momentum. I want people to still feel optimistic. So I am not encouraging a doom and gloom mentality, but we definitely want to make sure that we are doing things that are realistic and achievable. And right now, that's what you're going to need to show to others as well. They need to know, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's realistic. They can do it. I support it. But if you're talking about this grand goal that you have and it seems unreachable with what is going on, then they may not be likely to support it. So you definitely want to make those adjustments. And you even mentioned earlier about funding. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
diversify your funding. I know that's something that is said
Mm-hmm.
very often, especially in the nonprofit space, but you definitely want to do that now so that you're not dependent on any one source. Because again, the rules of the game have changed, and I won't be surprised if they change more. So there is no
Mm-hmm.
surefire way of anything where we used to be like, this is the way, because we knew
Mm-hmm.
the rules of the game. So we've come up with our strategy of this is
Mm-hmm.
how I win the game, or this is how most win the game. So those rules may not necessarily apply. So diversifying is going to definitely be a good option for most. With
Mhm.
that said, as it relates to events, a lot of times there's opportunity to do some diversifying with getting revenue at these events. And so I would suggest get ahead the
Mhm.
game for a lot of this, because a lot of times when people have events, they are doing afterthoughts on things. And in the space I like to work in, it is very
Mhm.
goals and objectives oriented. And so we're moving with intention as we're going through everything. And so, example, I'm not the hugest fan of galas. But with galas, for instance, there are things that you can do at galas to raise money in a
Mhm.
variety of ways, right? And even outside of galas, just even having a regular event, people are bringing out their merchandise and selling those, but being intentional about it, because you may have
Mhm.
limited edition merchandise that's just for this period of the year or this event or whatever. So you're like, I don't know if they're going to purchase this shirt because I already had these shirts for sale. If you have some limited edition items, then they may likely purchase those because they know that they might not be available
Mhm.
later. And so you want to have time to
Mhm.
design those items so that they
Mm.
look as if they're limited edition items, right? And so, and there are other things like that. I'm using
Mhm.
that for example, but you need time to prepare for those things and move with that intention. And it's just a convenience factor because we don't do it as much here in the state of Florida, but like there's a lot of organizations that do um
Mhm.
casino
Mhm. Mhm.
nights. And with the casino nights, that's an opportunity. If they get so many chips or so much money when they walk in the door,
Mhm.
you can buy additional chips. This is an additional
Yeah.
donation. You know what I mean? So there's so many ways to do things, but it's thinking through the process, because when you do that, you have to also make sure when you bring on that vendor, that that vendor is set up for them to sell additional chips to
Mhm.
people, like all of these are factors that kind of go into the
Mhm.
logistics part of the event that you want to just be mindful of. But I definitely think diversifying your funding is a really good way, or
Mhm.
something to consider, I guess I should say,
I
especially
love
with this
that.
year.
Yep. And with the diversification, which you touched on, it doesn't necessarily have to be new in the sense of, you mentioned you have this event, you're adding limited edition pieces into it. You might have a certain way of bringing in revenue for the organization or a certain service that you provide. You might add a little something extra or add-ons to that to be able to bring in additional revenue. So it doesn't have to be like brand spanking new. It could be something that you just reimagine. And you,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it could be something where, like you say, it's the same thing, you've been doing it, but you offer it in a scenario you've
Hmm.
never offered it
Yep.
before. It's nothing new. It's just we normally don't even bring it here,
Yep.
but we're gonna do it here this time. This is what we're offering. So it's definitely some ways to go about this process and thinking through. And anytime you can control what your funding
Hmm.
looks like and manage that process, you want to do that. I actually gave a
Hmm.
mastermind last week on
Mm.
job forms. And in the mastermind, the organization realized that they were selling merchandise and they was trying to figure out what was the best way to sell the merchandise. And they realized that Jotform had a
Mm. Hmm.
app
Hmm.
option on it where they could have put the merchandise on there, just had the QR code, and people just made the purchases right then and there. And so
Hmm.
it's so many ways to incorporate how you can get these things to work, because I think sometimes that's the limitation. They're like, I don't know how we're going to work this out, or I don't want, this, we don't have a square to take on site,
Hmm.
or I don't want to give this person the information access to take all these payments. You don't have to do all of that. There's other ways that you can get that kind of information and other
Love
platforms.
it, love it. And I really appreciate you coming on and kicking off this conversation and allowing us to shift our minds as to, okay, as we wind down, what does the new year look like for us, or what's next for us, and going through and kind of assessing those things to see, yeah, I know we said when we develop our strategic plan that these things are happening, but based off of what's going on right now, we might have to really zoom in on this and add some, additional diversification pieces. And we might have to back up a little and just,
Mhm.
not that we're not going to do it, but it might just not be a year or two or whatever year you're in, type of project to begin based off of what's going on. So thank you for kicking off this conversation and allowing us to pause and kind of think about, okay, what's next, and is this the right move to make? So thank you so much for coming on today. Can you tell us
Absolutely.
how we can stay in touch with you?
Absolutely. So, Catalyst Event Coaching is the website, it is the social medias that we have. So, that's also on LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as
Love
YouTube.
it. Well, thank you. It's always great to have you on, and I hope you'll come back and join us again throughout the year. And
Of
yay!
course.
Awesome. So, that's it for this Nonprofit Enthusiast Live, and thank you again, Shameka, for coming on. And we'll see you everyone next time. Bye.